I don't know about you guys, but when it comes to the legendary Pokemon, I think Johto contains some of the best, that being Ho-Oh and Lugia. These hail from the Johto region, of course, and today I want to specifically talk about a few things when it comes to Ho-Oh and Lugia. So welcome to the Origin of Pokémon, where we'll be taking a look at the facts and mythology, as well as the origin of legendary Pokemon, as well as loads of other Pokemon that are not legendary that you may want me to take a look at. So comment down below what you want to see next, and let's get started. Ho-Oh is first, and when it comes to this Pokemon, the first thing you want to know is where this Pokemon originated from and how everything started for this majestic legendary bird. It first showed up in the original Pokemon Indigo League anime, and the first episode where our boy Ash Ketchum happens to see this Ho-Oh, or a Ho-Oh, seemingly flying over him, which would imply that by the point that the animation was being created and made, they did have plans for Ho-Oh to show up at some point in the future of the series. Ho is known as the guardian of the skies and rests in the bell tower when it's not flying across the world, but it's also known to be a Pokemon with mystical powers, specifically the power to resurrect those who have died. A myth does say that Ho used to give anyone who saw it eternal happiness, and people used to spot it on the top of the bell tower in the Johto region, but after the brass tower got destroyed by a fire, it left the tower and started a search around the world for a pure-hearted Pokemon trainer, which could explain why Ash, as well as a few other trainers, have spotted it on their journeys as it's flying across the world in its search. When it comes to the amount of appearances that this Pokemon has actually made, it has shown up in the main series, and there's actually something really cool about it, seemingly with its backstory within the main series, which is that Ho-Oh lived in the Tin Tower back in the ancient times, but due to a war breaking out and then causing both the Brass Tower and Tin Tower to burn down, in the process it was rumored that Ho-Oh basically left the tower, but also that it resurrected 3 Pokemon that died in the Brass Tower, that specifically being that it resurrected 3 evolutions, and those ended up being the legendary Pokemon, or rather, when resurrected, turned into the legendary Pokemon Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. And this actually somewhat confirmed by the Pokemon Generations anime, where we actually do see seemingly do this. However, Ho does have some other things as well, because at a later point the Tin Tower got rebuilt while the Brass Tower stayed destroyed as the Burn Tower, and Ho basically decided not to return but instead to go around the world searching for a trainer with a pure heart. There is though something interesting that you can find at Mount Silver, and this is specifically only mentioned in the main series anime, which is that you can find Ho-Oh's sacred flame, which burns in the Ho shrine at Mount Silver, which was essentially something that was obtained during the same war as we mentioned before. Now we have a few its Pokédex entries that say a few things very similar to what we already talked about. In Pokemon Gold, they say, legends claim this Pokemon flies the world's skies continuously on its magnificent 7-colored wings. In Pokemon Silver, a legend says that its body glows in 7 colors, and rainbow is said to fall behind it when it flies. In Crystal's entry, it says it will reveal itself before a pure-hearted trainer by shining its bright rainbow-colored wings. And also mentioned in Diamond and Pearl is that those who see Ho-Oh are promised an eternal happiness. So it does seem like most of the entries are pretty much in the same kind of connection and vein as that which we talked about earlier from the main series anime, as well as manga and whatnot. But as for the entries, it does all make sense. I mean, talking about its pure heart and in search for a pure-hearted trainer would explain why it showed itself to Ash, as he is a pure-hearted trainer, and as well as that it kind of showed up to Silver, who gained a pure heart as he journeyed through the Johto region. Next, however, is when it comes to what Ho is based on in terms of mythology, origin, and stuff, it does seem to have a resemblance to a phoenix as well as a peacock, with the most dominant colors on it being gold and yellow, as well as red and orange, some kind of mixture of those. When it comes down to it, its origin does seem to have mostly a connection with, again, a phoenix, and specifically seemingly the Chinese phoenix FENGHUANG, which is believed to be the ruler of all birds. It is in tradition a representation of the sun and fire, as well as the beginning of a new era, which makes sense considering phoenixes are reborn from their own ashes. Another cool fact is that FENGHUANG in Japan is actually called Ho-Oh, without the H at the end, and would explain the name that we have for actual Ho-Oh with the added H at the end. But something I think most people didn't know is that if you played Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green and you got your hands on a Mystic ticket to get to Naval Rock, it is actually said to be the island where Ho-Oh as well as Lugia go to roost and basically just relax, which is sort of odd, but at the same time very interesting. If you go to the top of Naval Rock, the top part of it, you will actually run into Ho-Oh, and at the bottom you'll run into Lugia. So, that was what we had for Ho-Oh, but next, however, is Lugia. With Lugia, we get ourselves the second Pokemon from the Tower Duo. This Pokemon didn't appear actually in the early parts of the Kanto anime or games, but was first introduced in the good old days of the Pokemon 2000 movie, which was the second ever movie in the Pokemon series. Here we get to witness Lugia come out of the sea to quell the fighting between the legendary birds as the guardian of the seas. It made its appearance, forging a connection with Ash Ketchum in a far closer way than that of Ho-Oh, as they end up sort of fighting together in the end to quell the fighting between the legendary birds. But we actually do see Ash and Lugia end up having a connection and showing up in the Journeys anime, where Ash and Go try to capture this Lugia as well as a few other trainers who are trying to do a raid battle against it, but end up failing. However, Ash and Lugia end up having a connection when Ash and Go are flying on its back. And it does seem to be something that will be expanded upon in the future, as we have seen that this new version of the anime seems to imply that catching legendaries is somewhat more normal. As for when it officially showed up in the anime first, it actually showed up as a silhouette in the episode around the whirlpool, where it saves Ash and his friends from being sucked into a whirlpool. But this Pokemon does appear in several other places as well, like when it's summoned by Hoopa to defend Ash against Shadow Hoopa Unbound, or when it appeared in the Power of Us, where it had a strong connection to the history of the Fula City. And of course, as mentioned, we see Lugia in the Pokemon Journeys anime, where trainers try to raid battle it. As for the home of this Pokemon, it stays in the depths of the ocean, or in the Whirl Islands. What is kind of interesting is that this Pokemon is so strong that it has to hide at the bottom of the sea, because the simple act of it just flapping its wings could cause storms and winds strong enough to cut cliffs, but also strong enough to last up to 40 days. So yeah, it can create really crazy storms. Lugia also serves as the leader of the legendary birds, as we kind of mentioned before. It is there to quell the fighting whenever the legendary birds decide to fight over territory or just generally fight each other. With its insane strength and power, it can control the weather, and it can literally create storms or calm storms, down, and depending on what it wants to do. So due to its immense power, this Pokemon hides itself under the ocean and remains in solitude as to not inflict pain and damage upon the world, hence why you don't see it so often. This gets expanded a bit in the Pokédex entries, starting with Pokemon Gold. It is said that it quietly spends its time deep at the bottom of the sea because its powers are too strong. In Silver, it is said to be the guardian of the seas. It is rumored to have been seen on the night of a storm. In Crystal, it has an incredible ability to calm raging storms. It is said that Lugia appears when storms start. In Ruby and Sapphire, it's mentioned that Lugia's wings pack devastating power. A light fluttering of its wings can blow apart regular houses. As a result, this Pokemon chooses to live out of sight deep under the sea. And in Diamond and Pearl, it is mentioned that it sleeps in the deep sea trenches. If its wings flap, it is said to cause a 40-day storm. So this sort of just expands again on the idea that this Pokemon is one that forces itself into solitude for the sake of others. Now next is, when we talk about Lugia and what it is based on, it does seem to be based on some form of a reptile from the Cretaceous era, specifically the Plesiosaurus, which appeared first in the Triassic period. These were big old fish-looking reptiles that rule the oceans, and their bodies are very similar to kind of large dinosaurs or dragons-like resemblances, and these all fit with how Lugia looks like, as well as having kind of a pale color similar to that of like maybe a beluga whale is what Lugia has. As for its mythology and origin, that could be based on the Shinto god of the ocean known as Ryujin, who lived at the ocean floor similar to that of Lugia. And interestingly, Lugia's shiny colors, being red and white, are the same colors as the coral Ryujin's palace. But a cool connection that can be made between Lugia and Ho-Oh is that Lugia is sort of like a dragon, while Ho-Oh is the phoenix, and in Eastern mythology, this is often a very present duality that exists and does seem to make a lot of sense between the two, as they are kind of the polar opposites of each other. However, as for the origin of Lugia's name, though, here we have a interesting origin. See, Lugia derives from the word lutetium, which is a silver-colored element, but that word is, however, derived from the name Lutetia, which was the Roman name for the city of Paris. But I think that the theory that makes the most sense for its actual origin of its name has to be the name for Lugia that comes from the Latin lugeo, which in Latin means to lie dormant, which makes sense considering Lugia lays dormant at the bottom of the ocean as to not cause the world to suffer damage from its immense strength. But another thing that has to be mentioned with Lugia is that it's one of the few Pokemon, and probably the only legendary that we've actually really seen, which has the ability to create a child, or get a child Pokemon of its own. See, in the 220th Pokemon episode, The Mystery of History, we actually get shown the mysterious Pokemon X, which was the name of Lugia before an official name had been given. In this episode, Ash and friends run into a baby Lugia known as Silver, which is protected by its parent Lugia. This would imply that breeding for legendaries is a possibility and that there's more than one Lugia out there, I would assume, and the whole Naval Rock connection, as mentioned with Ho-Oh, about this being the place where Lugia and Ho-Oh go to roost on the island, could explain why they would do it there. I mean, that could be the place where Lugia goes to roost, and meanwhile also awaiting the birth of the baby Lugia within it, perhaps. Oh yeah, it's really weird to be honest, but yeah. Also, as mentioned, Lugia used to be known as Pokemon X before being introduced in Pokemon Gold and Silver, and funny enough, they may actually have ended up using this as the code name for Lugia in Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, that being XD001. But XD Gale of Darkness also showcased the immense power of Shadow Lugia, one of the first forms of a new Pokemon, like a new form of a Pokemon, and also one of the coolest forms of a legendary ever. So yeah, those are a few of the many things that can be said about Lugia and Ho-Oh. So what do you guys think about these Pokemon? Let me know in the comment section, and also a massive shout out to Bulbapedia as well as Wikipedia being super useful resources when it came to the information of this video. Big shout out to them. And yeah, that is all for today guys. Comment down below what you want to see next, and let's hit 1,000 likes for Lugia and Ho-Oh, as well as a brand new video on the facts, mythologies, and origin of different Pokemon.